So what's the Grape Explorer talking about today? So when I first started out in the wine business, we're talking 1981, 82. Actually bought my first company in 83. So when I was really involved in looking at, okay, where do I go from here? What kind of wines do I buy? I spent a lot of time in California. Obviously, it was close proximity, just hopped the plane, San Francisco. And this is right here where I ended up. I ended up in the Bay Area, and of course, I had a number of wineries here that I represented, close to 20. But one of the wineries I always have a really soft heart for was Girard Winery. And when I first started, back in, out there, I was in the 86. Steve Girard built this winery in 1980, began making wine. And good old Steve, he's up in Oregon right now with a winery called Benton Lane, because he actually sold his property. But one of the greatest areas is Oakville, and we're going to point it out on the map because Sonoma Valley's right here, but Oakville is this little blueberry right here. See, Oakville, right there. And what is special about Oakville, and what is special about this area? So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit here because this is not far from the Silverado Trail. And if you know, these are a lot of iconic wineries, but there's such a thing as called the Oakville Crossroad, and it cuts right across. And so when I was first out here to see Steve Girard, he welcomed me to the property, and he was explaining the different, Oakville properties that was next to him, and his next door neighbor was Silver Oak. And of course, I thought Silver Oak was one of the best wineries. And to find out that Steve's next door neighbor was Silver Oak, I was really intrigued. And I asked Steve, I said, hey, I know Justin Meyer owns Silver Oak. You think you can talk to him so I can get distribution of that in Florida? That never happened because Silver Oak was already doing a lot of business, prior to me coming along. They didn't need me, but Steve made great Cabernet Sauvignon, and that Oakville area just produced really just interesting wines. So this is the current vintage here, which is 2021. And this is no longer owned by the Girard family. They had to sell the property. And, that's the other story that I'm going to end up telling here that's important to learn about California today, because when I was out there in the 80s, it's a completely different world now today. And now, in order to own wineries out there, you got to really be a billionaire with a B, especially, with the amount of money that it costs to run wineries and everything like that. Steve and his family gave it a go. His dad was a very successful businessman, and so at least they had the funds to buy this property in 1980. But at the same time, Steve became really, really one of the elite players in Napa Valley, and I was proud to represent his property back in those days. But I wanted to try this wine because it's not owned by Steve anymore. And as you zoom in, I want to spend a little bit of time, just to explain that this is in 2024, Girard Winery was bought by Jason Adair, who is, of course, a billionaire, CEO of Copart Inc. He owns now Clos Pegase, B.R. Cohen, Kundi Winery, and Vianza. Yeah, this guy owns 5 wineries. That's quite the, if you want to say, the stable of wines. But what's interesting about Girard, and I wanted to spend that time because, how do you make wine today to compete with the world? Well, I always tell people, Napa is very expensive now. It's very hard to get. This is under $40 a bottle, which is like unusual today. So I wanted to do the Pepsi challenge, and I wanted to try this particular wine to see exactly if it was close to being the wines that I tasted in the 80s, which, of course, in Oakville, the fruit that Steve was getting was sublime. They're not using the same type of fruit. But let's smell this wine. So you get a lot of blue fruits and red fruits on the nose. Very attractive, by the way. So, and then you get a lot of spice tone. You get some of that chocolate. I'm sure they're using a lot of French oak here, so you can. But it's new. It's not new oak. I can kind of detect that it's not that powerful. So they're probably using a lot of neutral oak here. But when I do smell it, it's got that really bright kind of quality to the fruit, which is what I always look for. I don't want overripe fruit. So let's taste it. interesting. You know, you get that nutty quality that you get in the Oakville area that I always thought was kind of haunting. You know, when I tasted those wines, and then I would go up to Mount Vita, or I'd go to you know, Calistoga and other areas. They're completely different wines than Oakville. I always thought Oakville, wow, they're very charming. Again, now think about Silver Oak Napa. If you've never had that, that's another wine, you know, to check out. Again, you know, next door neighbor to this. But these wines are really, really good. And I want to say hats off to the new owners. You know, they're taking the Girard legacy, and they're keeping it going. Again, hats off to Steve and his wife. They're up in Oregon making great Pinot Noir. But at the same time, this will always be a Napa staple to me. And I just want to give a shout out to the Napa wine producers. You know that you know, you guys are making great wines. Keep it up. And talk about Girard. This is a beautiful bottle of wine. Cheers.